Before we begin, please note, the views and opinions expressed in this podcast are those of the host and guests and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of any affiliated organization. The content provided is for informational purposes only and should not be considered as professional advice. We encourage listeners to conduct their own research and consult with relevant professionals before making any business or career decisions. Enjoy the episode.
Welcome back to Science Warriors, where we explore the strategic forces that drive business transformation towards operational excellence. Again, it's the keyword, operational excellence. I'm your host, Adel Hameed, and today we're delving into a topic that is often glamorized, occasionally misunderstood, but ultimately indispensable to sustainable business growth: marketing. And I understand that marketing can be a vast topic to delve into, but today we have a special guest. His name is Hussein Hammoud, and he's been working with regional brands in the GCC, helping these international brands reach their customers through applying their own branding standards and also through a two-way communication and enabling them to tell their stories within the region. I won't get into the details of that discussion. However, before we start the interview, as usual in Science Warriors, I'd like to share some lessons from some articles that will help us be more prepared for the discussion ahead within the interview. And that is inspired by active learning or active listening. So we ask the right questions before we get into the interview so we maximize the learning that we get out of it. So today's episode 4 of season 1, will be focused on marketing. Before we get into the details, usually marketing is perceived as creating eye-catching campaigns or clever slogans and running expensive campaigns on billboards or running online campaigns, making them go viral. The truth is, these are very special cases. However, in most cases for us as SMBs and startups, we need to think about strategic marketing. What is strategic marketing? We need to try our best by applying the standards and thinking strategically to achieve our objectives. And then whatever comes out of that, we learn from it and refine the approach over time. That's the simplified answer. However, we'll get deeper into it. In a rapidly evolving business environment, marketing is no longer about shouting the loudest. It's about building resonance. As a McKinsey article highlights, the article is titled, "Invest in the Art of Storytelling to Raise Your Return on Inspiration." Let's think of it this way: getting an ROI or a return on your investment of time, effort on the campaign that you're running. However, let's focus on the word storytelling. Storytelling means that you have an audience. The audience could be your friends, your peers, your family, your customers, your investors, your employees. That's the way we need to think. And in this case study, I particularly like the example they shared because they shared an example about a CEO of an American tech company who wanted to announce a transformation initiative, announcing it and taking their employees, thousands of employees, through that approach or the plan. So he shared the plan through, of course, slides that are very logical, they look beautiful, but the outcome was totally different. The outcome was negative because the employees were looking at it as transformation, which is synonymous with job cuts and doing more with less. So the benefits that the CEO was introducing, it went under the radar, and people were demoralized, were demotivated, attrition was high, the employee attrition. So that's the example. I encourage you to read through it whenever you get the chance. I'll share the link of it in the show notes of this episode. When a survey was done amongst the management, 6 out of 7 of those management claim that this is due to the lack of empathy with the employees. It's a mistake because the CEO and the management didn't have empathy with the employees. So they introduced it from their point of view, which totally backfired and failed. So I'll leave the rest for you to learn through that article once you read it. And then another article I'd like to touch on is an article by Harvard Business Review titled 5 Gen AI Myths Holding Sales and Marketing Teams Back, which is another excellent article. It dispels major misconceptions around generative AI. Most of us, if you ask us or ask anyone outside within sales or marketing, they think about authoring and writing articles, writing blog posts, social media posts, and brainstorming. All they think about is that. But the truth is, there are many case studies where AI increases efficiency by up to 90%, which is something that's amazing from a business point of view. Because in that case study that they shared, there's a telecom company that was able to implement AI successfully and eliminate more than 90% of the manual work through automating the proposal optimization process. So traditionally, as a salesperson, I would sit with the customers, take their input, then go back, create a custom package, get the approvals, get the approval from finance, get the approval from my supervisor or the line manager, and then make sure that this is attractive to the customer, but at the same time it's profitable for us. Now that process would take time because you're dealing with multiple control points or approval points. And there is time that the individual also has to spend, whether they have an Excel sheet or a tool, whatever it is that we would use as an employee. I have to go through it. So that will take probably a day to finish. So the daily throughput will be very low. However, imagine if you automate that and get AI to do all of that work. All you have to do is just review it, make sure that the policy is applied, and then give it the final approval. And then with time, there is a level of confidence that you will build with the output of this AI. So you will start automating the approvals while you're doing quality checks on samples rather than on everything that goes out. So this is a case study within this article. I encourage you to read through it. We'll share the link to this article as well in the show notes of this episode. So now that we touched on these articles, we come to the main question, which is, what does this all mean for operating executives like you and me? It means marketing must be redefined as a core organizational capability, not just a department that runs a stream of activities. It calls for leaders who can balance intuition with data, technology with narrative, and speed with meaning. When I say speed with meaning, sometimes when we're looking at running campaigns and increasing the number of followers and maximizing reach, we lose track of why we're there, what are we trying to communicate, and what's the narrative. And this is very common when the pressures are high and the timelines are tight and the targets are chasing us, especially when it comes to lead generation campaigns. So it demands that we move from chasing just trends and numbers to building truth, building the story, from metrics to meaning. Anyways, I'll stop there and we'll get into the introduction of who our guest is, Hussein Hammoud. He's also the host of a show called Fijlay Talks, and he's a seasoned marketing strategist who spent more than 2 decades working with premium and luxury brands. He combines the analytical discipline of strategy with human craft of storytelling, building brands rooted in purpose, trust, and cultural relevance. And cultural relevance is key, so I need you to keep that also in mind when we're getting into the discussion. International brands, when they get into emerging markets, they need to customize the message to the local market so it is perceived positively. There are many examples that we could discuss in the future, but today we'll remain focused on the discussion with the guest. In this conversation, we'll explore how to architect sustainable marketing strategies, how to craft stories that move people, not just products, and how to embrace AI in ways that enhance, not replace, the human element. Whether you're a chief operating officer, refining a go-to-market motion, a founder scaling your audience, or a team leader trying to make your message land, this episode will give you the tools to build marketing that lasts. Let's get started. Hi, Hussein. Thank you so much for making the time to join us today. I know you're part of the partners ecosystem that I work with A8 Innovation and other projects as well. But today, we would like to learn from you and pick your brain on what is marketing as an operating executive. What is marketing? What got you excited about it? Maybe we could start by you giving us an introduction about yourself and what got you into marketing.
For sure. First of all, thank you for having me. It's really a pleasure and an honor. So, very briefly about me, my name is Hussein Hammoud. I usually define myself as a marketing enthusiast. So, I started my journey in the American University of Beirut, and this is where I started. I majored into business administration. And then when I did my master's, it was supposed to be in finance because I always had this dream of becoming or being in one of those audit companies. Merrill Lynch was, for some reason, one of my aspirations or target jobs. But then I took a course in marketing, and strange enough, it was a statistics course, and it was more about analyzing data of marketing and so on and so forth. And it got me excited. We also worked on a project together as a team and as part of the masters. So it got me excited because it has this beautiful world of creativity and analysis as well. We're going to talk about analysis in a bit in the episode. I feel it merges between those two worlds and it has a nice balance to it. So I fell in love with marketing. And since then, my job and my career has always been in marketing. And I really have a passion to it. And when I say passion, it's not only about me working into marketing, but also passing this knowledge that I have to other people as much as I can. And this is also why I have my own channel, which also taps into some of the courses or some of the tips I would like to give to people in the same field that are like my field.
Yes, I forgot also to mention Fijle. We'll share the link as well
Yes,
for the audience
yes,
so that they can follow you and learn more about what you teach.
yes. It's
Thank
actually
you.
obviously depending on the accent that you're coming from, where you're coming from, and many people say it. So, for example, I have my Egyptian followers, they call it Figla. So that's also another story altogether because of the letter Ja. But
Yeah.
it's Fijli Talks, and if we have the time to talk about it as well and tell you why the name Fijli, I would be happy also to share that with you.
Actually, tell us now.
Yeah, so I have my own channel, as you said, Fijli Talks, which basically the reason I wanted to do Fijli is because I wanted to talk about the foundation of marketing. Because at some point
Mm.
I felt it's not being ignored, but other things are taking the lead when it comes to marketing. So I felt that trends are becoming the lead, AI is becoming the lead, which is true and absolutely correct for any marketeer to be following, but not at the expense of foundation, of your strategy, of your brand purpose. So I really felt the need of communicating this and talking about this topic more. And this is where I started with Fijli Talks. The reason I named it Fijli, I also have a video about it on my channel, which is Fijli means radish, which is the vegetable. And if you all notice that radish is one of the underserved vegetable. It's not really considered whenever you want to do a salad, you're always thinking about a tomato or a cucumber or a lettuce or anything of the sort, but fijli is always down the line. And as marketeers, one of the things we always aspire to do is bring something that's either not top of mind awareness or not doing very well in sales, depending on the objective and the life cycle you are at, and moving it to the top. So I really wanted the fijli or the radish to compete with the tomatoes and the cucumbers of the world. And this is why I took an underserved name and I had. Obviously, there's other reasons why I chose the name because it has some relevance to me as my origin, as my roots when it comes to Lebanon and where I come from. And we use this a lot whenever we have something that it's a special southern dish in Lebanon that we eat, and usually it comes with the radish. So I thought it has also a personal story, which I think, again, since I'm tapping into storytelling, and I'm sure we're going to be discussing this, I feel whenever you have a story to tell as a marketeer, always inject it anywhere you're going, even from the brand name or the logo. If there's something that you could break a discussion or break the ice with someone next to you to talk about your brand in a storytelling format, always inject that into your brand and into your content or anything that you're doing.
I appreciate you got into storytelling.
Yes.
So maybe let's start from there.
Yes,
What's
absolutely.
storytelling? How is it used in marketing without being artificial or, in other words, like overdone?
Yes. Nowadays, there is one thing about marketing which is very interesting. I read an article the other day which says that marketing has changed in the last 3 years more than the last 50 years. So the amount of change that we had in the last 3 years has been tremendous. And storytelling is not new in marketing. We've always been telling a story. Even as people on a daily basis, whether you're trying to convince your wife about something, telling her to go to this dinner and not to this restaurant, which are those kind of convictions that we're trying to do to our people around us, it's always a marketing tool because at the end of the day, you're trying to sell your point of view to your wife, to your coworker, to your manager, to your son. So it's always a marketing message that you need to convey. The more you're telling this message in a storytelling format, I think is the more convincing it is. Rather than you trying to enforce your opinion or your message on the other, just say it as a story and let them feel that they made the decision without you enforcing them to do it. It's even like talking to your child sometimes, especially if he's in a teenager level. The more you make him feel that he made the decision, the better it is. And I'm not saying that our customers are 13-year-old, but I think customers and every person, it's in human psychology, they love to think that they are making the decisions and they are the force behind any adoption or decision that they're doing and not someone enforced it on them. They are obviously influenced by people around them, by the advertising that they see, by the comments and reviews that they see online. All of these are influencers, but at the end of the day, they should feel that they are the sole decision makers when it comes to the final output. So yes, going back, sorry, to storytelling, I think the more even now yeah, not now, for the past decade or so, we've seen with the outburst of social media that storytelling is becoming more and more important, and it's taking different formats as well. So, for example, in the execution format, if we want to talk about it a bit more, before it was more about the company talking to the people that are viewing them, but now it's becoming more natural, more organic, more laid back. So it's taking different formats as we move on, and depending on the brand and the category or the industry you're in.
One of the things we missed mentioning as well is that you've been working with some luxury brands, or if I'm framing it correctly,
So,
with some luxury brands in the region. And you've been responsible to communicate or help them come up with a regional strategy, but also execute on them.
yes,
Examples like Colhan, if I'm not mistaken.
yes,
So, can you give us some examples of how is storytelling used in their cases that we could observe?
yeah,
I'm sure that many of us would miss them because we just
yeah,
see them as they pass
yes.
by us. But from a scientific approach,
Absolutely. I think actually one thing is when we're talking premium brands, I think Conhan falls under the premium sector. Luxury, we're talking different brands or different set of brands. Colhan is one of the brands I actually love, other than the fact that we consume it a lot. But as a brand, as a philosophy, they are amazing. Yani, I'll give you an example is after we started exiting COVID, they had a campaign called The New Rules of Life. Okay, because
sorry, but just before we proceed, what is Colhan? What do they sell? What
hey,
kind of
okay.
products?
So for the people who don't know Cole Haan is a premium category of shoes, footwear, and they're very famous for their Oxford style shoes. And they recently started, obviously, with the trend and how the customer behavior is flowing. They went into more performance shoes and different kinds of shoes. So they're mostly famous for their Oxford kind shoes, but then they started evolving into many different categories. So regarding storytelling and how they used it beautifully is after we exited COVID or we started exiting COVID, they had a campaign called the New Rules of the World or the New Rules of Life. I'm not very sure about the terminology and how it's said exactly, but this is the gist of it. And basically, what they did is they had international artists choose one of the rules that they have written, as the brand has written, and they asked artists all over the world to express one of the rules in their own way. Okay, so this was supposed to be a campaign that we took and we had to adapt over here in the region as is. But we challenged it internally in the company. We wanted to challenge it because the art that is being expressed internationally is not necessarily relevant to the audience that we have in the region. And if you also look at it, we have a huge amount of artists that are emerging that already have their own weight in the market. So we challenged them to basically have our own interpretation of that with local artists, and we did. We collaborated with Kuwaiti artists. We collaborated with artists from the UAE as well, and we had their work. They had to choose the same thing, and they had to choose one rule and express it visually, and this is what we did. So I really, yani going back to how they used it, it's not a campaign that they had a picture of the shoes and the model standing next to it, and this is our new edition, and this is what's going to change your life. No, they said, let's engage with the community and let's let them express the work or the brand vision as they see it. And then we use their work to express it in our stores and in our communication as well.
Okay, so now we go into another topic with generative AI, with all of the buzz around AI. I look at it as another trend,
Hmm.
right? That impacts every sector, every function, every activity that you have within a company.
Yes.
But since today we're focusing on the marketing operations and
Hmm.
marketing strategy and marketing research, how can someone like me or someone who is an operating executive within a startup, within an existing corporation, how can they protect themselves from getting sucked into the trend and ground ourselves so that we remain focused on what really moves the needle? How can I apply these new technologies or these new trends into delivering outcomes, actual outcomes, enhancing the deliverables I have? And instead of getting lost into the trends and not knowing what would work, unless I have an unlimited budget, then I can, and time, then I can experiment.
Yeah.
Shortening the question is, how can we navigate the trends versus the actual work that moves the needle?
My opinion about AI is definitely, and this is my opinion. Again, I'm reading too many articles, I'm listening to too many podcasts about different points of view. Some are saying this is going to replace the marketing role completely. Others are saying because it's not only generative AI, because it's also the agent AI, which is also posing a bigger threat when it comes to marketing. But at the end of the day, as I said at the beginning, marketing has really a creative side to it and has really a human side to it and an insightful side to it as well. Because if you're doing marketing without connecting with the customers and just analyzing data, obviously I'm a data oriented person and I'm a data oriented marketeer. And I love to have data guide my decisions, but not fully and not always, I would say. Because at the end of the day, even if the data is telling me something, customer behavior.
So, how can we remain focused as marketing executives, not to get sucked into the trends and lose track of our focus and focus on the deliverables rather than focusing on the trends?
Absolutely. Okay, so basically, AI is definitely imperative in everything that we're doing. And every one of us is using one tool, at least one tool of AI on a daily basis. And I'm also reading and I'm researching lots about AI, and there are mixed views about it. Some people are saying that this is coming to replace our role as marketeers. Others are saying no, not necessarily. I'm more leaning towards the second one. However, with a bit of precaution, I would say. Yeah, what I mean by that is you need to learn about AI and you need to know about the tools and you need to use them wisely. At the end of the day, as marketeers, and as I said in the beginning of the episode, we're all about balancing between creativity and analytics. So at the end of the day, when we're talking about AI, we cannot deprive it completely from customers, from insights, from discussions that we're having on a daily basis, whether on a floor level with the customer or on an online, any online forum that we have with the customer. All of these insights are really important. And we cannot deprive any marketing strategy that we do from this information or from those interactions that we have with the customer. This is on one side. In summary, what I would like to say is yes, we need to be on top of the trends. We need to know how AI is going to help us, especially when it comes to analyzing data better and using tools that would help us make better decisions when it comes to marketing or business in general. But at the same time, do not lose the human touch. Do not lose the human focus that you're doing with, especially with your customers or even internally within the company. I was recently talking to one of the investors that I know, and he was approached by a business idea, a startup which basically generates, I think, images that are AI image generator, but specifically within our region in the Gulf. So I started researching more about it, and I also saw that the Gen Zs nowadays do not relate to or do not interact with anything that is fake, let alone if it's AI generated. They need something to be organic, they need something to be natural so that they can believe it. And Gen Zs, as we all know, are not going to be an easy audience on all of us, whether as co-workers or as marketeers or as customers that we need to attract, specifically as customers that we need to attract. It's going to be a very tricky thing because we need to be as natural as possible, which basically does not work when it comes to AI. Even nowadays, whenever we're seeing not only an image, we can detect that it is AI, you can also detect that a headline is AI generated or a copy is AI generated. You feel that there is something missing and a human is not involved in this output.
And in previous discussions, you mentioned the fundamentals of marketing. It's more important to focus on the fundamentals.
Yes.
Can you elaborate on that? What do you mean by the fundamentals?
Yes. The first fundamental I would say is your brand purpose. And this is something many brands do not, yani they focus about it or they want, yeah, they have something. It's not necessarily a problem solving brand purpose, which is when we try to go back to Simon Sinek, who is considered to be the godfather of the brand purpose or the godfather of the why and the golden circle. He talks about many brands, they go and start answering questions as the what and the who, and they ignore the why. So he gave examples of why, for example, brands like Starbucks or Apple are now successful is because they started with the why. And they started with a problem and they gave a solution to it. And they were very clear about it. And then everything started coming around this brand purpose. And my observation is that I would say is many of the companies are ignoring this and they tend to follow the trends that are going on without necessarily thinking whether this is relevant to my brand, is it relevant to my business, is it relevant to my long-term vision. So all of these questions are things we really want to answer before we get on board on a trend. I'm being bombarded, all of us are being bombarded on a whenever we're scrolling on our Instagram, 5 ways to do this, 5 tools to help you do that. Three, I don't know what is it's a lot. And I'm not saying they're not important. They are, but I we really need to go back to understanding the basics because there's no one size fits all. Not everything, not every trend would fit your brand, regardless of your industry, regardless of your brand purpose, regardless of your target audience, how they think, what they want. All of those questions needs to be answered before we jump into a trend. So that's why I always, whenever I'm being approached by my team or by my clients about any subject, I always like to go back to the basics and answer those fundamental questions. Once we tick those boxes, then we can start discussing a trend, and then we can start discussing going viral and talking about things that would actually can impact, let's say, on engagement and other metrics that we have on social media.
Yeah, thank you. You mentioned as well, if you want to get into advanced strategies, you need to first understand and implement the foundations.
So,
And other than what you mentioned, let's say in a very simplified approach, if we want to think about the pillars
yeah.
that we need to focus on within the foundation, what would that be? And how does the advanced strategy or operations work? And again, we're dealing with different sizes of companies, right? There
Mm.
is SMBs, startups, and uh, mature corporations. How does this also play a role in the level of details? I've seen companies that do fractional CMO roles,
Mhm.
right? That means they're too small to get into the details. That means if a company is too small to hire a CMO, that means they need to first build that foundation and then look at the advanced. So going back to the question, I need to understand the basics.
Okay.
What's the core? What are the pillars? And then that are prerequisites for advanced strategies that you were talking about.
How I divide any strategy is I usually divide them into three stages. Okay. Stage one is basically where you do all your analysis and your homework, let's say. Stage two is where you start going into the nitty-gritty of your strategy and start defining your goals, your business value proposition, your audience, and all of those elements that we talked about as well when it comes to purpose and its pillars as well. Phase three is actually where you start going live and you start monitoring the performance of your brand as a whole and then your campaigns to be more specific. So going back to phase one, where we're doing the analysis, and there's lots of different analysis that you could do, starting with the market analysis, competitor analysis, customer analysis, business analysis as well, in case the business already exists. However, if it's a new brand, you need to also do the three analysis that we mentioned earlier, which is basically also understanding the market size, the market growth rate, how the competitions are succeeding, are they not succeeding, where are they succeeding and failing, the customers that we're trying to target, where are they, where do they go out, for example, how do they think, how do they feel. All of these insights are done at the beginning in order to also identify the gap, because again, going back to the brand purpose, at the end of the day we are filling a gap in the customer's mind, or if it's not a gap, it's a pain point that they're currently suffering from, and we're coming with a solution. So, and this is where we start moving into phase two. Once we define a brand purpose, or we kind of have an idea of what the brand purpose is, we start going into different other questions like the brand value proposition, the positioning statement. Okay, this is how my matrix looks like, and these are how the competitions are placed along the matrix. And then I place my brand where it is currently, if it currently exists, and where I want to be. And we start putting a path of where the brand needs to move, defining the goals of your marketing efforts, which is all cascaded from the business goals at the end of the day. And also something I missed to mention is every marketing strategy should not be functioning alone without a business strategy. Some brands tend to do that, but definitely it's not advisable. Everything should come from a overall business strategy. The marketing strategy is always cascaded from that business strategy. And then going back to, again, the pillars of phase two, as I mentioned, the brand value proposition, positioning statement, defining the audience, the goals, many elements as well come into this phase. Phase three is we start asking questions about how do we want to do this and how do we want to go live with this strategy. And this does not only apply to advertising, but it also applies to every single pillar within the company. How do customer service respond to our customers? How do we respond to emails or messages on DM on Instagram? How do we treat our staff within the store level if we are at the store level? So all of these questions are then always coming or stemming from the overall business strategy that we have.
Just to connect or in continuation to your answer, if someone is starting from the beginning, let's say it's a startup, I know we're not only talking about startups, but let's say within the case of startups or someone who has never paid attention to the marketing function. They just did social media posts and they were outsourcing them. If they want to take their game to the next level, what do you advise them? Where should they start? And if they have a limited budget as well, where should they start?
What I'm about to say is something I advise not only startups, but any company, no matter what the size is. I
Mm,
always live by the rule, if your house is not ready to welcome guests, do not advertise about your house. Do not open
mm,
your house to guests. Okay. And what I
mm,
mean by that is I always lay any foundation of marketing, going back to speaking about pillars and foundation, is the three C's. Okay. And
mm,
the three C's are content.
mm,
Basically, as you said, if the business does not have a huge amount of budget to spend on outdoor, out of home media or digital media, even though there are many affordable ways of doing digital media, but they could always make sure that their organic content is relevant and is also shareable. Because once I, for example, see your post and I share it with someone else, that by itself is an ultimate marketing formula. Okay. The second C would be customer experience. Customer experience, and this is obviously at the different stages of the customer experience. I'm talking about the research stage. So when I'm talking,
mm,
the second C I want to talk about is the customer experience. Okay. And this is at the different levels of the customer experience. Even at home, when you are searching on your keyboard, looking for the closest bakeries or the bakeries that does these kind of donut specific gluten-free bakeries, you need to be easily searchable, easily located, and easily giving me the information that I need as a customer who's scouting around. And then when I come to your store, obviously the customer experience needs to be intact so that I can also recommend you as a brand to other people. And obviously, we cannot ignore the after sales point of contact or the experience because that's also important. It's more important with certain industries, for example, like cars or anything, or like electronics or anything of the sort. You have this part should be extremely important. But I would say it's important for any business because at the end of the day, you need the customer feedback on his experience buying your product, his experience using the product, and if there are any other issues or recommendations they would want to give you, why not learn from them and apply them to your business? The third C would be community. Okay, there's lots of talks about currently about community marketing, and I think it's one of, especially with Gen Zs and millennials, they're very much engaged when a community talks about you and not you are talking about yourself. So if you have, for example, I'm gonna elaborate further about community in an example. For one of the brands we used to work with in the fashion business, it was Max Mara, the Italian premium line of clothes for women. And they were celebrating the 70th year anniversary, and we started engaging with customers who have been with us for a very long time. And we made a group of um, let's say, very loyal customers to us. It's not a loyalty program, but it's more like a community forum that we created, and we wanted to engage with them to give us their opinion about our buying process, about our experience within the store. So this community is only not only about creating a mailing list that you can bombard with emails every now and then. No, it's a community of people that you can actually become part of your company in a way, influencing your buying process, your marketing process, and any other process that you have within the business. So this, I would say, it needs to become more focused and given more attention in any strategy in marketing.
It's interesting you went into community because that was in my book as well. It was the last pillar. There are seven dimensions, and one of them is working with the community as a startup leader or a scale up leader. How do you engage the community and work with them? And it might not give you an immediate return,
Yeah.
but having engaged with the community, some of them could be customers, some of them could be related to the customers. So there is an insight that we receive from it. So it's very interesting that you guys already in the fashion industry are using. In our region here, it's not very common. I don't hear it regularly. We hear it in Philip Kotler's books
Yes.
and case studies in developed ecosystems. But in our regions, it's refreshing to hear that you guys are doing that. And the other thing as well, the other question that comes is when you're dealing with the community, there are some businesses that look at marketing as a cost center
Mhm.
rather than revenue generating or lead generating / revenue generating function within the company. So this brings me to the question of how do you measure impact or your deliverables to the business? What kind of metrics do you use? We're talking about community is one of them, and if there are others, so I'll leave that to you if you can guide us through how it works.
This is a very important question, and thank you, Adil, for bringing this up because, again, one of the things I really think is missing in marketing is really the measuring part of it and the analytics part of it. But my answer to your question is really it depends on what's the objective of the campaign that we're doing, what's the objective of the strategy that we're working around. Obviously, if you ask any executive, especially in the commercial field or in the operations field, he will tell you one thing is we want to increase sales as of tomorrow. However, marketing does not work this way. In digital ads, and depending on your objective, if you're following a conversion led objective and you're trying to get immediate conversions with people who have already showed interest in your website or your Instagram, then yes, we are measuring this immediately. And if it's giving us a return, a healthy return on ad spend, then it's definitely becoming a profit center, not always a cost center. So this is one part. When it comes to other channels, the KPIs differ. So, as you truly mentioned, how do I measure community from my community marketing efforts? So, there are many KPIs that we need to look at. One of them is the retention rate. Second is customer acquisition rate as well. How many customers am I getting from referrals from those communities, for example? And obviously, you need to put the right pixels or the right ingredients for you to be able to measure and get the data from those community members that you have. There's customer lifetime value as well. You need to understand that the customers that are with you, whether it's community or not community, how long are they staying and how frequently are they buying and how much are they spending when they are spending. Lots of metrics go into the calculation of the marketing efforts that you're doing. It's not only about this is also one of the many discussions we as marketeers we have a constant debate and struggle to convince the rest of the board or the rest of the team that not all the time marketing is a press of a button. So I might do an ad even on digital today, but the customers would act on it 3 months later. They've already heard about your brand, but they actually were in the consideration phase 3 months later. So we cannot really ignore this part that there is a long-term impact on what you're doing now. Other discussions could also go into out-of-home media. Many of the clients that I work with, I have my preservations when it comes to out-of-home, and this is me personally. I'm not saying they're not important, they are. But again, depending on your objectives, on your budget, on the people you're trying to reach, if you're reaching to the mass audience, then yes, go out of home and you have the budget to serve that and you're able to measure this, then yes, at least from an impression basis. So, how many eyeballs are actually seeing your ad on an outdoor? And not many, unfortunately, in our region, not many media companies they have this technology to allow you to measure the eyeballs or the impressions of people that are looking at your ad. So these are again one of the things I always go back to anyone I'm working with is if you can't measure it, don't invest time doing it or don't invest your budget doing it. Always try to be in media that you're able to measure. Otherwise, you're in the dark. You're just shooting in the dark.
Yeah, that's also leads me into the last question for the discussion today is availability of data. So in emerging markets or developing economies, the availability of data is always a challenge for businesses. Whether you're in Lagos, whether you're in Dubai, the Middle East, whether you're in some regions of India, the challenge is always there. So I would actually like to understand what are we missing? So what are developed economies have? What kind of data do they have? Trade data, numbers that marketers do use, and if they're missing, what's missing in our regions, in the developing economies. But at the same time, what strategies do you use to overcome those gaps?
Um, okay. First of all, and I think in terms of availability of data, we cannot complain. I've been in the industry for over 20 years, and I've been in a stage where I have no data. Yani, if not no data, very limited data, I would say. But now there is actually, I'm not going to say abundance of data, but there's good enough data from different tools that are available for a very convenient price online or even in a system, ERP system that you could install within the company that allows you to get the data. But the problem is actually extracting this data, analyzing this data, and making decisions out of them. I think this is the gap we're having here in our region. So I would say in any parts of the world, the data are there. For example, if I just want to understand sentiments of people in a certain industry or about a certain brand, I can easily go on Google, check the Google reviews. I'm talking about the most basic way of doing it, obviously. But I can get Google reviews and understand customers' feedback and do the same for my competition and understand customer feedback. There are also many tools online that could also help you understand the sentiment of your customers and how do they feel about your brand and your competitor's brand to basically be able to make an action around it. So here I'm just talking about sentiments, which is very hard usually to extract. I know you're going to tell me that people are usually more vocal when it's a negative experience. I would say not necessarily. I would say probably to a certain extent, yes. You're usually more vocal about your review when you have a negative experience, but people are actually sharing their positive experiences nowadays, especially with Gen Zs who are very opinionated and they always want to make sure that their voice is heard and they're also making a statement in a way. So if they, for example, let's say use a brand that is environmentally friendly, they would actually go ahead and say, I'm using a brand that's environmentally friendly. So this is more of a positive response. I'm just going to the argument that not all the reviews that you see online are always negative. You can always also get a positive sentiment as well. So it gives you at least an indication. And I think, to be honest, sometimes you need to look at the negative more than the positives. So you need to look at what people's pain points and complaints are for your brand and for the competition, especially if you have the solution to what the competition is not offering, then highlight that. But just going back to data, I'm giving this as a very simple example. But again, your ERP systems that you have within the company, they should always give you all the data that you need. يعني, for example, in one of the companies I'm actually working with, we have a CDP system. CDP is a customer data platform, which allows me to go very granular in the data. And I could go into understanding, for example, again, we use fashion a lot. We have to apologize to your audience. We're always talking about fashion as examples, but again, it helps me to get data about customers who bought a white pants in the last quarter of last year. For example, if I have a new jacket that is also white that goes with their white pants, let's say launched next year, I could always reach to this specific customer. So this is how much data we have and how much granular we could go with the data. And we didn't have this luxury before. So I would say, no, we really have an abundance of data. It's all about finding the time to extract them, analyze them, and make decisions out of them.
Thank you. This is really helpful. Maybe before ending it as well, you mentioned a few tools. Are there any few recommendations or some of the tools that you use?
So there is for the sentiment analysis, we're usually using Brandwatch. It's one of the best tools that we use. There is a company for the customer data platform called InfoBip. These are the ones that I'm at least working with and familiar with. And this goes without saying also, you have the other tools that you have within your reach. For example, if you have an e-com platform and you're using Shopify, then you're also getting lots of data out of Shopify itself or Google Analytics. So this, obviously, we're talking about online platforms or online businesses. But when it comes to also the in-store experience, you have to look as a marketeer into the ERP system, the data you're getting, the footfall you're getting, the conversion you're getting, the leads that you're getting, the number of customers that are not converting, and why. All of this data is important. And I would not ignore, and one last thing, I would not ignore research. So, in addition to this data we're gathering from systems and tools that we have, you need to also go out there and do some research. And we've applied it in our business many times. For example, in one of our stores 3 years ago, we had footfall was actually very healthy. It was growing from year to year, but people were going in and coming out empty-handed. So we decided to install a survey, which we did with one of the research companies in the region, and ask people who are exiting the store without a bag, ask them why they didn't buy. We got lots of insights that helped us change our buying strategy altogether for that specific market. And we started understanding what their concerns are. Obviously, in this case, it would be one of two. Either the staff is not able to convert them or sell them the products, or the product is having an issue, whether it's price, quality, or collection itself, or maybe the overall service of the shop. Obviously, there are other reasons, but the main ones would be more towards the sales skills of the sales team and the product itself.
Thank you. This is really helpful. I've got more questions on the operations and stuff like that, but we'll probably leave it for another episode
For sure.
since we're running out of time. There is one last question that we usually ask all the guests are, if 50 years from now, someone asks about you, what do you want them to remember about you?
Okay, 50 years is a very long time, Adel, but what I want to be remembered for is I always like to be referred to as someone who's very rational. And you've noticed this probably in some of the answers I'm having is I'd like to go back to basics all the time. We shouldn't ignore the basics. Actually, if anything, your basics and foundation should be very strong because that's what's going to remain with you for a very long time. And I'm not talking only about a person or anything, even as a professional, as a brand, as a business, your basics and foundation needs to be rooted in the ground and everything should just flow around it. And that's why I talk a lot about following trends and not being tempted by trends, but having a strong foundation that could be serving for a very long time.
So I would summarize it in 2 words, say Hussein, the fair and pragmatic. Is this what they want them?
Yeah, or the Philip Cutler of the region, if you want.
Yeah. Amazing, amazing. So thank you, Hussein, for your time. And again, for the audience, we'll be sharing the links that we were discussing in this episode, and then sharing the link to your Fijla as well, to your show. And if you have any questions as well, share them. Thank you again. And thank you, everyone. So thank you, Hussein.
Thank you.
And,
Thank you for this opportunity again. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye.
That wraps up our episode today with Hussein Hammoud on what it really takes to building marketing strategies that don't just trend, but endure. From brand purpose and audience first storytelling to embracing AI without losing the human touch, this discussion was a powerful reminder. Good marketing isn't just about attention, it's about intention. And for the science warriors out there and the science warriors community, the hidden generals, operators, strategists, the behind-the-scene builders, Hussein's insights are a call to strengthen your foundation, to think more deliberately, and to design marketing that serves both the customers and the company. And of course, when I say the company, that means the example we discussed earlier, the employees internally as well. If you'd like to go one more step deeper into that topic, I highly recommend the HBR podcast on leadership. The episode is titled, Why Founders Need to Focus More on Sales and Marketing. And even though it's targeting founders, I believe the same advice and knowledge applies to our science warriors community, to the operating executives. Mark Roberge reframes early stage sales as a feedback engine, not just revenue generator. And that there are many tools out there like design thinking, agile design. It's all based on feedback from the customers. However, one of the best feedback that you could receive from customers is through sales. His point, market empathy is a muscle that must be built early. And from my experience as well, there are a dark side and a bright side of it. On sales, when you ask the sales team to bring you feedback, there is legitimate feedback that you will receive and a structured feedback that you will receive, because the intention of the salesperson is to sell the product to the largest number of customers you've got within your target market. However, sometimes there is a bias that kicks in. Out of desperation, because there is a product market misfit, some of these sales individuals will become desperate, and instead of thinking strategically on what will sell to the largest segment of customers, they will start randomly taking feedback and pushing it in as this will sell, this is what the customers want. And the pitfall there is that once you start implementing some of those features and some of those designs, you'll realize that it was demanded by one or two customers only, not the majority of them, and it's not a popular feature. But by the time you realize that, you would have probably spent 3-4 months and hundreds of thousands of dollars investing in those features. And those hundreds of thousands of dollars are in multiple forms. In the overheads that you spent on, the time that you spent on, the hourly development time that your team have spent on you paying salaries, paying for the tools, and all of that. So there is a pitfall there. However, keep that in mind while you're listening to the episode. It's a perfect complement to today's episode as well, and it will be, in my view, very useful, and I hope you like it. You'll also find a link to the Fijlay Talks episode, the profile of Hussein Hammoud, the 2 articles I discussed earlier, and the link to the podcast episode. If you found value in today's episode, please make sure that you share it with people who will find this useful, and also subscribe to Science Warriors, because this helps us. This is also feedback to us that you find it useful and you'd like more episodes from us that are relevant to the topics that you're interested in. Please share those topics within the feedback of those episodes, whether on Spotify, LinkedIn, on the preferred social media channel. Please share your comments, share your recommendations, and even if you have guests that you would like us to interview as well, please share their names and we will make our best effort to have them on the future episodes. I just have to remind you that this is right now, Science Warriors will be 1 season, 10 episodes. We will take the lessons learned from this to refine it and enhance it for the next season. So we really appreciate your feedback. Thank you again. And as always, I'll leave you with one question to reflect on this week, which is marketing strategy built to impress or built to endure? And by endure, it opens up more questions. What does enduring mean? Does it mean scalability? Does it mean building empathy with everyone around you? Does it mean building a culture where employees have such a high belief in the values and the purpose of the organization that you don't need to motivate them? They will run by themselves, motivating themselves and each other and impressing the customers. Thank you again. This is Adel Hameed reminding you that behind every market breakthrough, there is a science warrior, making it possible to succeed and to achieve the organization's objectives and to build a successful landmark story, not just any story. Until next time, keep innovating and keep executing.